My name is Randall Eggert. This class is Grammar and Stylistics. It's about writing clearly.
Prototypes. So in this video, we're going to introduce a notion, that of prototypes. It's a way that humans have of understanding our world. We choose an image in our head to represent words or ideas or concepts that is sort of seen as the prototypical image. It's the one that we then use as a benchmark to evaluate other members of a set. So I want you to start by picturing a bird. So when you hear the word bird, what image pops into your head? And I've done this a lot over the years with my classes, and I'll ask this, and the answers I get are pretty consistent. So there's usually some student who chooses a robin. That's my personal image. Cardinal, that's another common one that students will mention. A sparrow, a bluebird. There's usually a student who chooses an eagle, although that one's a little less common, and we'll talk about why. And since this is Utah, there's usually a student who chooses a seagull as their sort of prototypical image. Now, there's some things that all of these birds have in common. First of all, they all fly. We don't typically imagine a bird that is incapable of flight. Emus, ostriches, penguins, those aren't usually what we picture. Not even a grouse, which is a pretty common bird around where I live, but it's not one that people choose because it's an odd bird that, although it's capable of flight, it doesn't like to fly. And so when you startle one in the woods, they flap their wings like crazy, and then they just kind of run away. So we don't choose it because it's not our image of what a bird should be. A bird should be flying up in the air like an eagle. Now, eagles are a little bit odd in comparison to these others because they're big. We don't usually choose really big birds. Condor is not one that typically students will choose when I ask that question. The other thing that we expect to see is sort of normal feathers on a bird. That makes penguins doubly odd. They don't fly, and what they have, although we know that they're feathers, they don't look like feathers. People also don't choose peacocks because their feathers are unusual. They're too flamboyant. Okay, so that's what I've got in mind in terms of a prototype. It's rather consistent for how we view the world. Which brings me to parts of speech. So as we talked about in another video, often people are taught that a noun is a person, place, or thing. And I also argue that this is a terrible definition if we actually want to capture the set of nouns. But oddly, it works. Students are taught this and they're able to identify nouns pretty consistently. And I've argued that the reason is because we already have a concept in our head of what a noun is, and all we really need is a term for it. But there's another side to it that makes it work, which is prototypes. That our prototypical nouns are things that are salient, things that we can process with our senses, especially our sense of sight. And humans are, in some sense, the most prototypical nouns. So when we ask people for a noun, they often choose something like boy or girl or man or woman. Those are good choices. And then we can extend from that and include animals like dogs and cats and cows and eagles, right? Those are also good exemplars. And once we've got those exemplars, we can build onto them. We also know that things like buildings that we can see, touch, even smell, those make good prototypes for our nouns. And then objects, things that we can pick up. you don't tend to start with things like happiness. And even though we know that happiness is a noun, it's not a prototypical noun. It's not the first noun that comes to our minds. Same thing goes for verbs, which we're usually taught are action words. Again, it's not a good definition if you want to actually capture the set. But it works because, again, our most prototypical verbs are actions. So, for example, run, or kick, or hit. Those are really good, solid verbs that help us to understand then that other verbs, which are not prototypical, like seem and appear, are also verbs because they behave the same way. So again, we already have that category. It's just that when we're in elementary school and our teachers tell us that verbs are action words, we're just applying a label to a concept we've already had. And we already understand that if run is a verb, then seem is a verb because they behave similarly in sentences. The same principle applies at higher levels in sentences, which we will see in future videos.